Coming up on today's show, we've got some signings to get to in just a moment. But after that, we're going to talk about whether or not moving on from Baker Mayfield was a mistake after a very, very good playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of Browns fans were talking about whether or not Andrew Berry made the right call. And then we'll talk about what the Browns' grade should be for 2023, and then who grew the most this year from the Browns. But let's start off with 10 players that were signed to reserve/futures contracts. So these are guys that are just going to come back and already be on the roster for the start of OTAs, minicamp, all that good stuff. 9 of these 10 players were on the Browns practice squad for 2023. The only one that was not was Jayden Peevy, former UDFA. He actually has some NFL in-game experience with the Tennessee Titans. Now, he was on the Titans and Panthers practice squad this past season. But some names that pop out to me, Jaelon Darden, he has a potential role on special teams. John Kelly, he was activated to the active roster for the playoff game. Vincent Gray got called up for Week 18 against the Bengals. And then you've got like a former 7th rounder and Isaiah Thomas and some recent UDFA signings like Zaire Mitchell-Paden and Lonnie Phelps. So just some names to keep an eye on right there. Not anything groundbreaking, but those are 10 players that were signed to future contracts. Now let's get into the fun part of today's show. Was moving on from Baker Mayfield a mistake? A question that has had the entire fan base torn for about 2 years now, ever since the trade went down. And I'm going to say one Bernie head. I think it's got some shreds of truth. I'd be lying if I stood here and I said that the trade has gone perfectly from the Browns' end of things in terms of moving on from Baker and getting Deshaun Watson, and it's been a disaster for Baker Mayfield. No, Baker Mayfield had a hell of a game against the Eagles on Monday night in the wild card round, 22-36, and if some of his guys didn't have Butterfingers, he'd probably have a higher completion percentage and more yards and maybe even an extra touchdown to go along with it. But Baker played his tail off this year. Like, give credit to the Bucs. They had the most dead cap money. They were in a bind. They went for a very cheap QB contract in Baker Mayfield, and he over-delivered. Career year, 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns. But as for the question of, was it a mistake by the Browns? I don't think you can simply say, oh, what Baker did in 2023, those 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns, if he was on the Browns, he'd have the same numbers. It doesn't work that way, right? We know that. But also, I think what's more important is Baker's a person. We have heard so much over the last 2 years how much he has grown and also just how much he has gotten back to himself. And I don't think he'd be the quarterback he is today if he did not go through the adversity he went through in Carolina and then going to play with Sean McVay in LA. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that the Browns just held on to Baker Mayfield, never traded for Deshaun Watson, extended Baker, that he would just progress the way he did. No, there were a lot of dark and low days for Baker. Like, he was having a really tough time in Carolina. And outside of that Raiders comeback win for his first game with the Rams, there were some low moments in the City of Angels as well. So I just don't believe that the idea of, well, Baker this year would have been exactly what he would be if he was on the Browns this year. It's not that simple. I don't subscribe to that thought. Now, I can understand that the trade for Deshaun Watson has mixed reviews so far. Unfortunately, only 12 games through 2 seasons, which the Browns knew what they were getting into in terms of his lack of availability for the first year with an impending suspension. But this year, I'm sure they wish they saw more of him. 8-4 record is probably not stated enough when people talk about the Browns trade as this ultimate disaster when it really hasn't been. They just haven't had Deshaun on the field as much as they would like. So if you had to pick a quarterback right now, who would you rather have? Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield, right? Going into 2024, if you're starting a team and you get to pick a QB as a GM, I'm picking Deshaun Watson, right? And this isn't a dig at Baker, but Deshaun Watson's ceiling is much, much higher. And ultimately, I just think 2 years, only 12 games from Watson, it's too quick to judge whether or not it's been a disaster of a trade. The Browns knew that when they signed Deshaun Watson to that 5-year contract, that 1 year of those 5 years, they weren't going to get a whole lot out of it, which was last year. That was a part of the plan. And if you think otherwise, I'm sorry, but you're just on a different planet. Now, this year, only getting Deshaun Watson for 5 games, 6 games, was a bit of a disappointment, but injuries are something that you just simply can't control. And so that's why I'm going to hit pause on deeming whether or not the trade and everything that went on from moving on from Baker to moving to Deshaun Watson was a disaster for the Browns. Come back and ask me next year, right? Once I see more from Deshaun Watson, more than just 12 games, and once I see more from Baker Mayfield too. I remember Daniel Jones won a playoff game last year for the Giants. He's not smelling too good right now. So let's not just rush to judgment here, very, very quickly removed from the trade going down. Second segment on today's show. How about grading the Browns' 2023 season? This has been a very popular question I've seen tossed across social media and whatnot, and I would give the Browns a B+. Not an A, not a B, but a B+. Right there on the line of B+ to A-. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to give it an A-. But first, a shout out to our sponsor today, which is Factor. Get started on your resolutions with Factor so you are ready for the new year. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Factor now offers loads of snack options like breakfast smoothies, juices, snacks, and more to keep me going no matter what's on the schedule. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. Head to factormeals.com/BrownsChat50 and use code BrownsChat50 to get 50% off. That's code BrownsChat50 at factormeals.com/BrownsChat50 to get 50% off. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. So let's talk about grading the Browns 2023 season, which I gave a B+ grade. I don't think I have to state how impressive, and that's just not even doing it enough justice, and amazing it was that the Browns overcame so many injuries to so many key players at so many key positions and still went on to win 11 games. Could have won 12 if they really tried in Week 18, but we'll call it 11 games here. But ultimately, they laid an egg in the playoffs. And if we go back to August, what was the goal for this team? For some, it was to make the playoffs. For a lot of us, it was to win a playoff game, right? And making the playoffs, and not just making it, but like clinching the 5 seed before the Week 18 games even got underway. That was a very big accomplishment for this locker room. But ultimately, you go into that locker room after that game and no one's going, yeah, you know what, we're just happy to be here. We just wanted to get an invite, right? No, this team had bigger goals. And it's one thing to lose in the wild card round. It's nothing to get your shit pushed in. And they didn't even wake up for this game. And because of that, I'm going to give it a B+. Had they kept it close or just showed some life and some competitiveness, I can get behind an A- grade and go, you know what? The Browns just lost to a really, really good Texans team. But the Browns didn't even come to play on Saturday. And I think that has to weigh into evaluating the season. So for that reason, credit to them. They overcame. Look at all these key players that they lost. Like Deshaun Watson. Nick, I know we've heard this a million times, but one last time. Watson and Chubb. Like, could you imagine going to any other NFL team going, hey, you're starting quarterback and you're starting running back, and they're gone. And you're going to make the playoffs. And on top of that, you're going to lose your top 3 offensive tackles, your kick return / punt returner, Jakeem Grant. And on the defensive side of the football, let's take your 3rd defensive tackle away. Let's take your starting linebacker and your backup middle linebacker. Let's take 2 of your top 3 safeties away. And the one that we're going to keep, Juan Thornhill, he's going to play about 2/3 of the season. Oh, and you know that kicker that was one of the best in the NFL? Yeah, you don't get him at the end of the season. If I tell you all that and say the Browns win 11 games and are the 5 seed, you're probably over the moon happy. But ultimately, this team was facing all these injuries for a long time. And so for them to lay an egg in the playoffs, I just don't think that's excusable, right? Here is the good news. The locker room installed a winning culture. This locker room shed the factory of sadness stigma, hopefully, okay? They hopefully will retain the resiliency that they learned, the ability to not quit, not give up. Kevin Stefanski is one of the best NFL coaches all times following a loss. So take what you learned this year. right? That winning culture, that bond and camaraderie in the locker room, the resiliency, and then get healthy and put it together. And I'm looking at the 2023 Ravens, who dealt with a lot of injuries last year. No Lamar Jackson. And what did they do this year? They won the AFC. Not quite, but they got the 1 seed. You know what I mean? So all eyes are on Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson to take what the good things were from this year, what they learned, and what happened in that locker room, and now put the X's and O's together. Because Stefanski had a lot of success with Joe Flacco. Let's get that going with Watson. And if everyone comes back healthy next year, and this locker room is ready to roll and pick up where they left off, I mean, they very well could be a 12-win team without breaking a sweat. So grade the Browns' 2023 season for me. I give it a B+. I do want to get your opinion down below. A, B, C, D, or F. How would you grade the 2023 Browns? Third portion of today's show. Who grew the most this year? I'm going to go with our favorite linebacker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think JOK took the biggest step this season across the board. Like, JOK showed us some really good things in year one. And then year two was a bit of a regression year and also missed the last quarter of the year with a foot injury. But JOK this year was, one, available. Something he was not very much of in his first two seasons, okay? Then he tacks on 101 tackles. 20 tackles for loss. Like, the guy's not just some average linebacker. The guy's flying into the backfield, and he's dragging running backs down. He's taking up wide receiver screens. 3.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 2 interceptions. PFF had a hard-on for JOK, 76.7 overall grade. He ranked in the top 20 of all linebackers. And what jumped out to me the most, and I think we all saw it throughout the entire season, but he didn't quite know how to put a number on it. And PFF does, which is stops, right? That's a tackle which results in an ineffective or a failure of an offensive play. Like on 3rd and 1, making a tackle. Might not be a sack, might not be a tackle for loss, but maybe a no gain. And on the stat sheet, that goes down as one of your 5 tackles. But we all know that was a huge tackle. JOK had 61 stops. That was tied for 4th in the NFL. The guy was making big plays. JOK took a huge step forward. And so now I'm looking at number 6, and I'm thinking, with Anthony Walker and Sione Takitaki both heading to free agency next month, JOK might be the X factor for the Browns in 2024. Because if Andrew Berry decides, as much as I love Anthony Walker, I can't bring him back for a 4th year if he's played 13, 3, and 12 games. Would that be out of bounds for a GM to say? And Takitaki, I thought, showed some good moments and some bad moments throughout the season. But JOK, he is the X factor for the Browns in 2024. Because they might roll with JOK, a cheap linebacker, and a rookie. And they're going to lean on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to be their number 1 linebacker, right? To be the guy that leads the middle of the defense. And so that's what I'm excited for to see out of JOK next season. Okay. Looks like we have producer Trace hopping on here in a moment here. So, Trace, what's going on? Oh, my God.
Pick a card time.
I was wondering what the hell you were doing.
It's pick a card time,
all right. For a moment, I thought you had a really strong take about JOK. And I was like, I don't know where this is going, but hop aboard. It is pick a card time.
It's pick a card time.
I'm just not prepared for my own offseason. I'm not ready to be in the offseason. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, offseason mode, we pick a card at the end of every single episode. Trace, what card do you want to pick?
I'm going King of Hearts because Joe Flacco was our king and he stole our heart this year for the Browns fans.
And it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Joe. Happy birthday, Joe.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Okay, we ready? I'm going to go with the 2 of clubs. What'd you say?
King of Hearts?
Nah, not even close. 5 of hearts. 5 of hearts. Joe Flacco was 15. 5, you said heart. That's pretty close.
It's the same thing.
That's pretty close. All right, that's going to do it for us. Let me know who grew on you the most this year. Like who took that big step in 2023 that you can't wait to see return in 2024.